Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how I made this video here. Jumping into my planning, like I said, it was a shoot on a short notice, so I didn't have time to make a full mood board, storyboard, and shot list. So I kind of just assembled a bunch of visual references that I could kind of look at leading up to the shoot. So I basically went on Google Maps and I looked for the track layout, and I actually went into the person view so I could see which angles would be possible to get. And then I also went ahead and found some photographs that other photographers had taken to get an idea of the kind of angles I could get at this track. And so this shot inspiration is just a curation of images I found online, some from racing magazines. It basically just serves as a reminder for me to get these shots. So race car driver putting on his helmet, shooting through this little window in the fence, the starting grid, some tires inside the cockpit, the dash of the race car, which I actually forgot to grab, some B-roll shots of the car's details, like the wheels and the wing, and then also a flag moving, the starting position. And then I moved on to the style, and so the style is basically just how I wanted everything to look. And so I first started off with the color. I really liked this color. I knew that I wanted to go for a 16mm film look, reminiscent of a Kodak, the Vision 3 250D stock, without the grain. And then I went ahead and grabbed some stills from another video that had been made, and this is just a close-up shot of the eyes of the racer, and then also the car gearing up to go on the track. And then I also made a note to kind of capture the pit crew slash team, so that it wasn't just about the driver, it was also about the entire race team. And then lastly, I tried to come up with some ideas of how to show the speed of the race cars. And so I thought about a few films I had studied in college, and this one director from Hong Kong, his name is Wong Kar-wai. He has this effect called the step printing effect, where he manipulates the shutter of the camera, basically leaves the shutter open longer to create these kind of like light trails or the sense of motion. And so I made a visual note to grab some shots in this style. So yeah, very, very bare bones, but this actually helped out a lot more than you'd think. Okay, let's talk gear. I knew that I wanted my backpack to be as light as possible just because I was going to be at a track for 3 days on my feet, and I didn't want to be lugging around a bunch of heavy equipment. So I just brought the essentials. I brought my Sony a7 III mirrorless camera with one lens, the Sigma 24-70. I brought an extra battery and battery charger. I knew I'd also need a tripod for static shots. I packed my DJI RS3 gimbal for stable moving shots. I also packed my Deity shotgun mic. I threw in a set of lavalier mics just in case I'd be able to interview the racers, but I unfortunately didn't end up having time to do so. I attached a side handle to my rig for better handheld stability. And lastly, I packed a laptop and memory card adapter to offload footage in between the track days. Alright, so let's talk about my approach on shoot day. This was a 2.5-day shoot. I arrived Friday evening and left Sunday night. I decided that I wanted to approach each day differently, but I knew that I needed to get proper coverage each of the days, and just what coverage means is making sure I had a wide, medium, and close shot. So I used 24mm, 35 to 50mm for the mediums, and then for the close shots, I was pretty much using 70mm. Now, one thing I just want to mention, anytime you go into film something that's more running gun style, and it's not as planned out, you just need to remember that, yes, you are making the video, but you do need to understand that you play a smaller role in the grand scheme of things for the person that is hiring you. You do not want to get in the way or impede the natural processes that an athlete has to kind of take to perform at their highest levels. So, I went into this knowing that I kind of needed to lay low and not get in the way. I spent the first evening on Friday night kind of just scoping out the race car tracks. I didn't even, use my gimbal at all. I just had my tripod and my camera. I captured general shots of the race cars flying by, crowd reactions, and important landmarks on the track such as the scoreboard, starting grid, and entrance. This was more of a test day, and I only used a few clips from this day, but I actually got a lot of great photographs. So on the second day, I committed to using my gimbal. I knew that I needed to capture almost all 24 frames per second clips on this day so that I could shoot, slow-mo and the other more experimental clips the following day. The gimbal really came in handy this day, not just for stabilization, but I raised it as high as possible in the air and kind of tilted the camera down to shoot over the fencing. This allowed me to get a lot of clean shots that would have, otherwise been obstructed by the fence. I also took the time to film a bunch of B-roll of the car, the team, kind of their setup or camp, and then I also took the opportunity to kind of follow the driver Jake up to the starting grid for his qualifying race. I split my time, staying in the pit and capturing shots of the crew and kind of the small details like, filling up tires, kind of talking through the headset, checking track conditions, and then I spent the second half capturing shots of Jake driving. After the second day, I had a really good understanding of the shots that I had and the shots that I needed to get to tell this story. I realized that I had a lot of wide and medium shots, but I was lacking in the close-up department. So I spent a large portion of this day in 70 millimeters, and I kind of just made sure that I got enough coverage of Jake and also his car on the track. I also knew that I needed some slow motion clips, and so I switched my camera over to shooting at 60 frames per second, which is a lower quality at 1080p for my specific camera, but I knew that there was going to be some moments that I either wanted to speed ramp or just slow down clips or speed them up, so I made sure to shoot for about an hour or two, focusing only on slow motion clips. I also made sure to include those experimental step printing shots I talked about during the planning phase, so I set my camera shutter to 1/15 of a second, and then I kind of experimented with using a gimbal, handheld, or kind of rotating the camera on the tripod to see what kind of unique effects I could get. I think, all of the effects looked pretty cool. And then I made sure to kind of go to different parts of the track and stand at different proximities away from the cars driving by just to capture audio. I knew that I was mainly going to have to add a bunch of audio in post-production, but it's pretty hard to recreate, specific Porsche 992 race cars driving by. It's really something you can only hear if you're there, and so I wanted to make sure that I captured that audio. Right off the bat, before any of the shooting started, I realized while I was driving that I had forgotten a piece of important gear. It was essentially a bracket that allows my camera to connect to my gimbal, and without that, my gimbal would have been pretty much dead weight. So I made sure to overnight a new bracket from Amazon. I didn't think it would come in time, but thankfully it did. And then also, I wish I would have paid more attention to the weather. I kind of just assumed, being in California and living here in San Diego, that it would be sunny, but the track was actually, pretty overcast, which made it great for, lighting reasons, but it did change the feel of my video to be a little more gloomy. And then also, on the second day during the qualifying races, it actually rained. So I borrowed a umbrella from my hotel, and I kind of was walking around trying to shield my camera from the weather, and I ended up getting some raindrops on my actual ND filter, which kind of ruined a few of my favorite shots. Now, if I were to do this all over again, I think I definitely want to grab a 70 to 200 millimeter lens just so that I could zoom in more. I was kind of running around from edge to edge of the track, and then also for those really tight details of the cars kind of, zooming by, it would have been really nice to have a lens with more compression and also just, a closer image. And then lastly, I'd definitely bring a GoPro and a dash mount next time. I wasn't sure if it was allowed and I didn't ask, but with that said, I think, having this cockpit POV angle would have brought an entirely new depth to the video. Right, so before I started putting clips together, I laid out a basic breakdown of how I wanted the rhythm of the edit to go. And I knew that I wanted the video to be no longer than 2 minutes. I think it ended up being around 1 minute and 45 seconds, which was perfect. And I kind of had this idea to make the video not be so linear, just because I thought it would be a lot more boring if I started off with the racer just getting ready to do everything and not showing him kind of racing. So instead, I decided to add a fast succession of clips at the beginning, kind of showcasing the speed of the race, and then interweaving, these clips of Jake, the driver, gearing up for his race. And then I wanted a slow but gradual build-up of clips that kind of shows, what Jake was going through on race day. And then I knew that there needed to be some sort of climax or aha moment going on towards the end. And I needed to basically find music that either stopped or reached some sort of point where things could kind of slow down and we can show this moment. And then obviously a slow, gradual taper off for the resolution, and then end at the credits or the graphics card. And then here is just an overview of my editing workflow and kind of the steps that I took to assemble this final edit and get everything ready for delivery. And I'll go through each of these very briefly. So the first thing I did was I organized footage. So that's just creating the folder structure, separating clips by frame rate, so slow-mo, and then the regular speed. And then also color labeling each shot by type, so wide, medium, close-up, shots of the car, shots of the driver, shots of the crew, and then detail shots, B-roll shots of the car, etc. Then I created proxies and all my different sequences. So this is just to kind of increase the timeline scrub speed so that, my computer wouldn't just freeze all the time. Working with really large 4K clips will sometimes slow down your computer, so I made sure to create proxies. Usually what I do is I create a footage sequence, and then I drag all the footage into this sequence, and then I watch the footage completely. So I had about 150 gigabytes of footage, and that kind of leveled out to 2 hours of footage that I had to watch through completely, just so that I made sure that I wasn't going to skip over any clips that might be important. And then once I had watched all the footage completely, I made another sequence called Selects, and this is kind of my first pass. And so the goal of this was to essentially condense that 2-hour footage to 30 minutes of the best shots. And so I did that. I realized that I needed to condense the footage even more, and so I took that 30 minutes of footage and I condensed it to 12 minutes of the very best shots that were going to tell the story I wanted to tell, and that's going to be in the second select sequence that I named Second Pass. And once I had the selects of the best shots that I wanted to use, I began searching for the right track to kind of guide the story. And, keeping in mind this rhythm plan that I came up with before, I needed to find music that allowed me to tell the story in this way. And I'm not, really good at music production or, cutting up music and, using stems and assembling songs. So I relied heavily on just choosing the correct song that would allow me to execute this idea as well as I could. Then I created the final timeline, which I named Main Timeline. And this is kind of where I start assembling the clips and kind of testing the order of clips. And usually it takes me a few different timelines, kind of just, playing around with the placement of everything. It's not always the case where the first edit that you make ends up being the one that you finish with. And so I think I went through 2 different main timelines until I figured out, kind of the order that I really wanted to go with. And then I finalized that clip position. Once I knew where all the clips were gonna be set, I moved on to color correction. So this is simply just, fixing the exposure, contrast, and making white balance adjustments to the clips so that they look proper. And then after that, I went on to stylizing the look of the video. And so I actually do my color grading in DaVinci Resolve. And so this allowed me to kind of go for that 16mm film look I talked about during the planning phase. And then from there, I decided to make speed changes. So I took a few of the clips and I slowed them down. I increased the speed of certain clips. And then I had a few moments where I had some speed ramping. And then after that, I knew that I needed to stabilize some clips because a lot of them are shaky, especially the handheld clips. And so I used Warp Stabilizer in Premiere Pro. I used DaVinci Resolve stabilization on a few of the clips as well. And then I needed to do some visual effects / cleanup. So a lot of this is just, setting keyframes for zoom and scale, positioning, creating visual transitions between the clips. And then also, fixing some sensor errors. It rained, so I had some spots on my ND filter that I had to clean up, as well as my sensor was actually pretty dirty, and I didn't know until I had already shot that there were some artifacts on my footage. So there was a very long and tedious process of removing these unwanted spots. And then, kind of settling down to the end portion of the edit, I designed the end card. So that's just choosing the right typography, creating the credits and kind of the layout of how I wanted, the final title card to look. And then the very last step I took before rendering was the sound design. And so I made sure to incorporate, the right sound effects. I fine-tuned the music, so I cut the music and tapered off / faded the music in places that it needed to be. And then I adjust audio levels and added some audio transitions, so like whooshes. And luckily, I had the ability to use the audio that I had captured on site, which was really good. Even, using this clip right here.
Top Sergeant back to poise off that shirt after starting in the second place,
That I recorded from the announcer talking through the megaphone, and I was able to kind of use that in places throughout the edit to kind of make it feel more alive. I also made sure to incorporate some sound effects that I downloaded online or that I had in my sound library. And then once I had finished all that up, it was time to render. So I kind of experimented with, rendering in a widescreen layout. So, with the little black bars on the top. Realized that wasn't really the effect I was going for. I tried incorporating some grain as well on top. Didn't like it so much. I wanted things to be just very clean. And so I exported, in multiple formats, different bit rates. So some for Instagram, and then another version for YouTube or, a website. All right, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. This was really fun to make. I hope that you learned a little bit more about the whole video process. And if you've learned something, let me know. Throw me a like, comment, subscribe.